grown out of it. Neither of them had ever really grown out of it. Or maybe Caroline had by now. Sherry hadn't spoken to her in years. She tried not to think too much about Caroline. She returned her attention to the Winesap Herald. The murder was on the front page, of course. Prominent local realtor arrested for business partner's murder. There was no mention of Sherry's involvement. Sheriff Brown tolerated her helping out with his cases, but he wasn't interested in sharing credit for his arrests with the local librarian. That suited Sherry just fine. She didn't help him with his cases because she wanted fame and glory. She did it because she was good at it. Sherry took her time with the rest of the paper, paying particular attention to whether or not the advertisement she'd taken out for the upcoming library bake sale had been printed correctly. It had been. She also took note of a cello recital that she'd like to see in Albany. Then finally, and reluctantly, she read the national news. She always read the national news so that she'd be a well-informed person. But she'd noticed more and more recently that she had trouble remembering any of it. The world's affairs seemed very far away in Winesap. Once she'd dispensed with the paper and cleaned up after her breakfast, Sherry got washed and dressed and battled fruitlessly with her crop of wild, graying cowlicks for a minute or so. Sherry generally thought of authors as powerful and mysterious creatures, like Olympians. But if she ever met one in person, she would feel compelled to speak to her kindly but sternly on the topic of hair. There seemed to be a general agreement among authors that unruly hair was a sign of a free-spirited and artistic nature, as if zaniness was extruded through the follicles. "I'm afraid," Sherry imagined saying to the author, who would have very tidy blonde hair in a chignon and be wearing a cream-colored silk blouse, "that I'm not free-spirited and artistic at all. I'm very cautious and conventional. I clip coupons for laundry detergent out of the monthly mailer, have only ever slept with one man, and never learned how to appreciate poetry. My hair just comes out of my head like this." It occurred to her abruptly that this was a distinctly zany thing to think about. Maybe the authors were onto something. Sherry gave up on her hair and bundled herself in all her warm winter things. It was just about freezing outside, which wasn't particularly cold as early April went. Sherry was a sturdy, upstate New Yorker now, firmly removed from her soft and vulnerable Floridian youth, and prided herself on her ability to be scornful about any temperature above 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Besides, the sun was out. She passed a few evergreen bushes still clinging on to bright red berries that stood out like exclamation points against the dark greens, whites, and grays of the landscape. They were the sorts of berries that she and Caroline would definitely have put into their potions when they were little girls. They had a wicked look to them, like something that would poison a princess in a fairy tale. Snow white, blood red, Sherry thought, and the branches of the trees as black as ebony. She assumed they were, at least. She'd never known what ebony actually looked like. A few brave jays and chickadees were shouting salutations or obscenities at each other as she walked across the road and down the long gravel driveway to Alice Murdoch's house. Like Sherry's own driveway, Alice's driveway was snow-covered, except for a narrow walking path that ran down the left side, and would remain so until she had a guest who needed a place to park. When they'd first met, they'd bonded over the fact that they were two of the only people in town who didn't own a car. Sherry rang the bell, as usual, and, as usual, waited for a long time in the